Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. I know every time we do a Toronto Zoo program, we get a whole bunch of new classrooms and families joining in. So if you're joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, before I dive in with an introduction for our speaker, I want to do a huge shout out to all our teachers and families joining us today across the continent and beyond. Toronto Zoo programs are the most popular programs we ever run here on the broadcast, and especially so this week. So this is ostensibly March break. It was supposed to be March break here in Ontario anyway. I know that got pushed back, leaving a lot of teachers wondering what exactly they were going to do. So I really appreciate you joining us. It's going to be a really special and fun, engaging program today. So welcome in to all our families and classrooms. So as I said, Toronto Zoo programs are the biggest programs we ever do. We've done over 30 with them, all of which you can check out on our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe for at the end of this broadcast if you're keen. But today we are going to dive in on frogs. We're going to learn a little bit about Canadian native frogs. We're going to see some cool tropical frogs. We're going to learn about our amphibian friends and all sorts of cool information about them. And to teach us about that, we are joined by Mary Ellen Fraser and the team at the Toronto Zoo, the keepers there, who are going to walk us through some really, really fantastic wildlife today. So buckle up, get ready. Thank you so much for joining us, Toronto Zoo team. Unmute that mic and take us away.
Hi everyone, my name is Brendan. I'm one of the keepers that works here in our Americas Pavilion, and I love frogs. Frogs have got to be one of my favorite animals that I've ever worked with. There's a number of reasons for that we'll get into. I love their biology. I love their adaptations. They're just amazing, amazing creatures. So what I'm going to do right now is walk you through some of the species of frogs that we have right here in our pavilion, talk to you about how they live with us, how they live in the wild, some of their adaptations, and how they cooperate, and how they would normally be found out in the rainforest. So right here in our first habitat, we have our lemur leaf frogs, which is a type of a tree frog. And then we also have our Panamanian golden frogs. Now, fun fact about the Panamanian golden frogs is even though they're called a frog, they're technically a toad. And that is because they have glands right behind their eyes that actually can secrete poison. So that's one of the best ways to tell frog versus toad is the presence of those glands behind their eyes. But here in our habitat, we have a pretty accurate representation of what these animals would look like in nature. So there's one of our lovely little golden frogs just hanging out by the river. Now, golden frogs naturally can be found in very high current river systems. They live near waterfalls, they live near large river systems, and you will often see them just kind of hanging out above the water. And a really cool fact about these guys is because they live near the river, very loud, very noisy, they can make a call, a vocalization, but they generally don't. What they will do is a male, so this one here is one of our males, they'll get to a really high visible point and they just start waving, basically like, hey, I'm over here, maybe I'll get a date. So if you ever come visit us at the zoo and you see one of our golden frogs waving at you, take that as you will. You apparently are attractive to a golden frog. But they can also be found mixed around with all types of different frog species. So in Panama, where you'll find our golden frogs, you can also find our lemur leaf frogs, as I said, a type of tree frog. So we've got two different lemur leaf frogs that we're going to focus on today. One is you can see the camouflage, really excellently camouflaged against that blade of, I believe that's a type of iris plant that he's sitting on right now. Now, believe it or not, this individual frog is only about a week old. They are born right here at the Toronto Zoo, and I will talk about the life cycle of a frog, how they develop, and how you can watch them grow right here at the zoo. Now, these lemur leaf frogs are nocturnal, so nocturnal meaning they do prefer to come out at night. So this is how you would normally see them during the day, all curled up, nice and camouflaged, really sleeping away the day. But we are very lucky. We actually have one of our lemur leaf frogs right now has decided to wake up just over in our corner there. Let's see if we can spot him. There he is. You can see him right there, right by Mary Ellen's finger. That is kind of what they look like when they're awake. Very big, bug-eyed, lanky limbs on them. He's doing a nice move for us. They can hop pretty far too. Easily a few feet horizontally if they want to. They do prefer to kind of walk from place to place. They use those super adhesive feet to stick to whatever they happen to be on. You will also sometimes find them just stuck to the glass on the front of our habitat here, and then you can get a really nice look at their underside and how they tuck their feet in to make themselves so camouflaged. So I did say we do allow our frogs to breed naturally here at the zoo in this very habitat. So back focusing on our pool, our water system here, you may be able to see some tadpoles. I don't know how clear the video footage is going to be for trying to see the tadpoles, but believe it or not, there are roughly 50 tadpoles, of our lemur leaf tadpoles rather, in this pool, at different life stages. So all these guys are laying eggs at different times. They hatch, the tadpoles drop into the water. So we've got some tadpoles that are extremely small, about 1 centimeter long, and some tadpoles that are almost 3 times that size. So it really depends on when they were hatched. So life cycle of a frog. Let's get into that because we are focusing on tadpoles. So the frogs start out as eggs. In the case of lemur leaf frogs, eggs are laid usually on a leaf right above a water source. And then when the eggs hatch into the tadpoles can just fall into the water. So they're completely aquatic. They live completely in the water when they're tadpoles. They feed on algae and plant matter, really anything they can come across in that water column. And then as the tadpoles develop, they grow. The first thing to happen to them is their back legs grow out. So you will often see when we can hopefully welcome you all back to our wonderful Toronto Zoo, tadpoles swimming in this pool that have back legs. So that's when you know they are just getting there. They're almost grown up. Then they start sprouting their front legs. And as soon as they sprout their front legs completely, they'll climb out of the water because they no longer need to be completely aquatic. They lose their gills once their front legs are out. But at this point, it's a really cool thing for a frog. They can't eat when they first develop those front legs. And that's because the mouth of a tadpole is completely different to the mouth of an adult frog, because they feed on different things. Tadpoles are eating vegetation like leaves and other plant matter, whereas the adult frogs are eating small insects. So during this time, their mouth is changing. It's changing to be a completely different function, a completely different look. And while it's changing, they can't eat. But in the awesomeness that is tadpoles and frogs, what happens is they will, as they absorb their tail, so they still have that tail when they sprout their limbs, that gives them the nutrition. They're basically eating their own tail. They absorb their tail and they get the nutrients from that. Actually, here's one of our lovely frogs right up at the front here coming out to say hi. Give you an example of how bulgy those eyes look. But you can tell that they're nocturnal because of this. Their eyes are enormous, so as they can catch in whatever light they can in order to see. Beautiful, beautiful lemur leaf frogs. Now, I could talk about these frogs all day, but we need to move on to some of my favorite types of frogs, and that is our poison dart frogs. So over here, in our poison dart frog habitat, we have an example of one of our blue poison dart frogs. You will actually always hear us talk about these particular frogs in their Latin names. Sometimes when it comes to reptiles and amphibians, common names like blue poison dart frog can get a little confusing. So if you hear me talking about them and I say a weird word like Azurius, that is their Latin name. And that's just because that's the way my head goes, because that's a more accurate way of describing exactly which frog you're talking about. I could say blue poison dart frog. There's about 30 species of poison dart frogs that are blue. We talk about the individual species in Latin. It makes me sound fancy, and we know exactly what we're talking about. Now, believe it or not, we're going to scan around this habitat. We might see a couple of frogs. I did just give them some fruit flies. There's a blue guy in the back there. I don't know if we can quite see him. But believe it or not, there are 30 frogs in this individual habitat. That is how well camouflaged a bright blue or a bright orange frog can be in a green rainforest-style habitat. Now, what I love to talk about with these particular frogs is cooperation. So oftentimes you have different animals that cooperate with one another where they get a benefit, or even animals and plants. So these frogs have what's called a symbiotic relationship, or it benefits both of them, with a plant called a bromeliad. Now we have a nice big bromeliad here in the back of our habitat. This is this plant with the droopy leaves coming down. So what happens is the poison dart frogs will sit deep in the crevices of the bromeliad. That's where they live. It gives them their nice camouflage and protection. They lay their eggs on the leaf of the bromeliad, and when the tadpoles hatch, because it's a rainforest and because this plant has those cups, water pools in there. So the eggs will hatch actually down into those cups. Tadpoles grow up and emerge. I got to stop what I'm talking about right now because we have a very small little frog here. This frog probably absorbed his tail about a day or two ago. This is a very, very young frog. This is a natural breeding situation in our habitat here. Just goes to show you these frogs are happy. These frogs are healthy. They are the absolute cutest when they're that small. To put it in perspective, from head to backside, that frog is probably only a centimeter, maybe a little slightly over a centimeter long, whereas the full-grown adult would be about 3 to 4 centimeters. So when they do completely develop, they become miniaturized versions of their adult selves. So this is an example of one of our green and black poison dart frogs, or Radis, if you want to be fancy with your friends. And like I said, he looks very, very young, probably only metamorphed within a week. Easy. Really, really awesome thing to see. And this is one of the reasons I love frogs so much, is you can see their growth, their development. You actually go from egg to froglet like this within the span of about a month and a half. So when it comes to a breeding program, you see the results, you track them, their growth. It's an amazing feeling. But back to our bromeliads, because I got distracted by our baby frog. So I talked about their eggs are laid, they hatch, the tadpoles develop in those puddles, and then they emerge and become a little froglet like this. So that's how the frogs benefit from the bromeliad. And for a long time, they didn't think that the bromeliad actually benefited from the frog at all. But they're actually starting to do research, and what they've discovered is that the nitrogen that is in the feces or poop of the frogs benefits that bromeliad. So the plant absorbs that nitrogen. It's a really important nutrient for plant growth. So plant gets the nitrogen, frogs get a safe space to have lay their eggs and grow their young. Everybody's happy. So that's why we provide them with these plants. I guarantee you this little froglet that we're looking at here was once an egg on that bromeliad, grew up in that bromeliad, and then emerged once he was ready to start hopping around. Absolutely fantastic. I know it sounds like I'm putting it on, but I am legitimately this excited at the fact that I got to see this little froglet today. He is just a stunner. Now that being said, I could talk for 3 or 4 hours about poison dart frogs and about our lemur leaf and Panamanian golden frogs, but we want to talk a little bit about our native frogs and what we have here in Ontario. So we're going to go wander over to one of our graphics, and we're going to have a chat about our native frog species.
All right. So as we're walking through, everyone, you're going to get a little mini tour here of the rest of our Americas pavilion as we're just walking through. Come on with us. When the zoo does reopen as well, you are able to sometimes pop your head through and you can be part of inside of the frog exhibit with our little friends in there. All righty. We're going to do a camera pass back and forth here, and we're going to talk a little bit about our frogs. So as Jesse said in the beginning of the video, hi everybody, my name is Mary Ellen. I've been behind the camera up till now. But let's talk about the frogs. The ones we just learned about, they are super cool, but obviously we do not see them naturally here in Ontario or in Canada. And if you think about it, if you've been outside in the last couple months, you probably haven't seen any frogs or toads, probably even a reptile even, have been really hard to find. And that's because we've been going through our winter season. And a lot of those animal species that we have here in Ontario, they hibernate or sleep through the winter. They actually go through a really cool process where they're able to shut down parts of their body, like their metabolism. They can slow down their breathing. Some frog species will go underneath of the water. So if we turn around here, actually, we have our otter exhibit here. We might get a fun little side-by of our 2 otters there at the top swimming around. But you'll often find animals like reptiles and amphibians. They will go down into the lower levels of lakes, rivers, ponds, marshlands. Just like our snapping turtle here, this is him right here. You can see he's hanging out just at the bottom there. And people think, isn't that so cold? That's too cold for them. But really, as long as it's water, that means it's not frozen yet. You know, It freezes at 0 degrees, so as long as it is still liquid, they're able to hang out in it. And frogs, they'll stay above the muck and everything like that as they do some of their breathing or absorbing of oxygen through their skin. So they do have to stay in water that is clear and able for them to move around and be able to breathe and everything like that throughout the winter. There's some frog species out there as well who you might actually see because they don't go into the water. What they do is they find somewhere safe up on land, so in barks of trees, and they essentially freeze themselves over the winter. They become a frogsicle, we could say, where all of their cells are very specialized and they're able to freeze. And we don't actually know if they're dead or not until they thaw out in the springtime and they're able to start jumping around and coming back to life. So keep your eyes peeled. Right now, it's just starting to warm up. It was very cold here in Toronto this morning, but it is nice, easy sweater weather this afternoon. This is the time of year that we slowly start to see our amphibians and our reptiles waking up, coming back out into their life, and so you can start looking for them again. Now, what I will say though is we always love to encourage all of our friends out there to be citizen scientists. So frogs need your help in the wild. They are such an incredible, important species for us. We can call them an indicator species. So this means they can tell us the health of a habitat before we can even tell if the habitat is in trouble. And what I mean by this is a frog, like I mentioned, they do a lot of absorbing through their skin. It's very porous. They can do oxygen, carbon dioxide back and forth, but it means they also absorb what's in the habitat around them. They're just like a towel in that sense. They can pick up everything around them. So if there are poisons or toxins or anything like that in the habitat that could be affecting them, we will see a decline in their population first. So we like to monitor different frog species and toads out there, and that's how we can tell if a population or a habitat, is healthy or maybe needs our help. So they're super important for us. And there's some really cool ways that you can get involved with that. We have here, if you're from Ontario, we have Frog Watch Ontario here. So this is a fun little pamphlet. You can find it online as well. But what's awesome about it is when you open it up, it gives you all the information about all of the frogs and toads that we have native here in Ontario. And these are the ones we really want to keep around and look out for, as they offer so many benefits for us, not just as an indicator species, but as we're going to learn in a second, frogs lay a lot of eggs. And the majority of those eggs end up as other animals' food. So they help to populate and keep fed higher up species on a food chain, as well as they take care of quite a few nasty pests that we maybe don't want to have hanging around, like a lot of insects, things like that that we find annoying or farmers do. So they're great for overall health that way. Now what you can do is I have here on my iPad, there's a really cool app if you have an adult nearby or mom or dad, or you have a phone that you can use yourself. There is an app called Adopt a Pond. And this is really cool. You can actually submit sightings for animals you see, frogs or turtles out there in the wild. But what you can also do is play for animal sounds. So if you are out in the wild and you want to know who you're looking at, it gives you a nice little ID guide here, so you can check out all the turtles we have native here to Ontario and our frog species. So if you're here at the Toronto Zoo, we have this amazing little It's a Frog's Life display here. And you can come up. I don't know if we're going to be able to hear this today. It's a little loud in this building, but you can play. So I just did two of them there. That last one that we heard was a cricket frog. Hopefully you were able to hear at least a little bit in the background there. But it's really cool. You can check out all of our different frog calls that you hear, and that might help you identify them in the wild. When you're on the app as well, though, it also plays them out loud for you, so you can try and figure out, and then you can report a sighting. And this just helps scientists overall who are tracking these populations know how many there are left in the wild, and where their kind of hot spots are. As we noticed in that exhibit a few minutes ago, it's kind of hard to spot some frogs. They are very good at camouflage. And the ones that we have here in Ontario, they're mostly green and dark brown, so they blend in really well. Now the last thing we'll do is we'll come over to our little wheel of life here. I mentioned how important they are for other animals' survival. This is your chance. If you've ever wondered if you could survive as a frog, you get to spin the wheel. So this is where the marker is here, and we'll spin our wheel around. I might have spun it a little bit too hard. We'll slow it down for us here, and we'll see. So right now, we die of temperature shock after a sudden rush of cold water. What a horrific way to go for us as a little frog. That is thumbs down all around. Now you notice on here, there's a lot of orange and a lot of the different colors. If we lose over here, or move over here, this is the only one out of all of these ones. Congratulations, you lucky frog. You've survived to adulthood. So as we can see, out of all of the options here on the frog wheel of life, there is only one where you get to survive to your adult stage. So that means it's a pretty tough life out there for a frog, but they are super important to our habitats. And we need to band together, become citizen scientists, and look out for all of our frog species all over the world. Alrighty, with that, Jesse, we're gonna turn it back over to you for some questions. And what we can do, we can head on back over to our other frog friends to get some more close-ups of them. And I also have a video we can play while we're doing questions, just so everyone can see our amazing frog species up close.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mary Ellen, for such an awesome presentation. Thanks to the whole team for showcasing so many cool frogs. And we will start that video in just a minute. I want to know, whoever the genius is who put "you are eaten by a leech" as one of the deaths for tadpoles is amazing, because that's the most undignified death of all time for a frog spawn. So,
oh, I know. Some of the ways that you go as a frog on that wheel are very specific and intense, for sure.
It's a very intense diagram. I like it. So this is a fairly new thing to the zoo. When I originally got into the zoo, this was a new display. So for people, when they get a chance to go back live, it'll be really exciting to see that and all the other amazing creatures there, of course. So we've got at least 6 full classrooms joining in on YouTube. Miss Wilbix, Miss Gary, Miss Presnell, Miss Matsuda, Mr. Iarde, and Mr. Shattuck. Welcome into all of you guys from across Canada and the US. We're going to take questions from the chat bar as well. What we'll do is we'll dive in with Miss Krupel's class first. They're going to kick us off with a question. Miss Krupel is joining us in Toronto right down the street from me with her grade 2 classes. So come on in, guys. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, we had 2 questions for you, if that's okay. So, one, we were wondering if all of the different poison dart frogs in nature, if they would actually be together, all the different colors, or if they stay kind of separated. And the other question we had was about their heart. When they are a frogsicle, does their heart stop, or does it keep beating?
Very cool.
Very excellent question. So I'll answer the first one about the poison dart frogs. In nature, in South America, you would find all the different colors of frogs in around the same area. It is just different colorations. There's no reason for their colorations other than a bit of camouflage. And of course, bright colors usually mean I'm dangerous, so don't come near me. But it would not be unusual to see all of the different colored frogs, even in the same plant. They do like to mix around. And as far as the frogs, when they're frozen, does their heart stop? It does not completely stop. The heart still does have to keep going, but it is extremely slow. Like, it would be the equivalent of our heart beating maybe once an hour. It's enough to keep them alive, but virtually non-existent.
Very cool question to kick us off, Ms. Purple. Thank you for that. I love these pictures of frogs in the video right now we've got. So fantastic video, guys. Let's head to Miss Becker's class. They're joining us in lovely San Diego. If you want to unmute your mic and come on in, go for it. Hey, Miss Becker. Oh, there we go. Oh, thinking about it.
Hi, good morning. What are frogs predators?
Yeah.
Predators of frogs. So basically, think of it as anything that can fit the frog in their mouth tends to be a bit of a predator. In South America, where you find a lot of these frogs, frogs can be predators of other frogs, so that's an issue there. All other kinds, sometimes snakes. There actually are snakes that are specially adapted at eating the poison dart frogs. They're immune to the toxin. They don't have any effects there. Here in Ontario, birds mostly are going to be predators of frogs, but as well as things like foxes, raccoons, other small mammals will generally be the type of thing that would eat a frog. Fish too. I mean, if you're in a lake here in southern Ontario and you see a bunch of green frogs or even bullfrogs, you can count on a couple largemouth bass being around looking for that specific tasty snack.
Yeah. It really isn't being green. Your diagram is correct. Let's head to the Smith Smarties class joining us in Stratford. If you guys want to unmute your mic, come on in. Go for it, guys.
Our students have a couple of questions. What's a group of frogs called with a special name? And are there other differences between frogs and toads other than just the 1 and 200 years?
Wow, very good questions. To be perfectly honest with you, I do not know if there's a specific name for a group of frogs or toads. That would be fantastic if someone even wanted to give that a quick Google search and even email me at the zoo. I would love to know. There are some other differences between frogs and toads other than the glands behind the eyes. By and large, it varies from part of the world to part of the world, but by and large, you're looking at toads being more of a terrestrial animal, whereas frogs tend to be more aquatic. Of course, that doesn't fly with the poison dart frogs and your tree frogs and that. There can also be some differences in development. Some toads, like the American toad that we have here in Ontario, doesn't go through a tadpole stage. It actually hatches from the eggs straight into a toadlet, a small version of the toad. You generally don't see that in frogs. But by and large, if you really don't know what you're looking for, it can be tricky to identify them.
Yeah. By the way, a quick Google search has been done. So it is an army of frogs unexpectedly and a knot, like a tied knot of toads. No idea why.
That is incredible.
That makes
it is incredible.
Sense ever.
Yeah,
we are very happy with those answers. Wow, so many other teachers joining in on YouTube. I'm going to take a couple of YouTube questions and then come back to Ms. Barajas in just a second. So let's see. So many questions. Holy. Miles from grade 5 in Ms. Huxley's class. They're in Paladin. They want to know, can frogs' skin be poisonous? Which I think we've covered a little bit, but if you could explain a little bit more about the poison, that would be great.
Absolutely. So it depends on which one you're talking about. So the poison dart frogs and even the Panamanian golden frogs, they get their poison from what they eat. So in the wild, they would eat all kinds of things such as fire ants and termites, which have venom and toxins in them. But once the frog digests these animals, the toxin from their prey comes out their skin. So as we talked about, their skin is very porous. They drink through their skin, they breathe through their skin. But that's how the toxin comes out their skin. So thankfully, here at the Toronto Zoo, we do not feed our frogs any fire ants or termites. So they still have their color, but they're actually completely harmless. There is no toxin on these frogs. When it comes to toads, though, they get their toxin from those glands.
Yeah. I love that. So this is something that we've covered in a few broadcasts in the past, and this idea that you literally, I guess you not are what you eat, but you secrete what you eat. And so again, if you wanted to hold one of these frogs in your hand, there'd be no threat to you whatsoever. Yes?
No threat to us, but there actually would be a danger to the frogs because the oils on our skin are very, very harmful to these animals.
So this is something that I really wanted to stress and harp up on in this program. So if people are in the woods and they see a frog, should they be very cognizant about picking up frogs? Should they ideally leave them alone? And if they do pick them up, is there any protocol people should follow?
Ideally, absolutely leave them alone if you possibly can. There are times where frogs and toads will be in the middle of the roadway or something, and you say you want to get them to a safe place. In a perfect world there, you would have a set of gloves on, just something to prevent your skin from coming in contact with their skin.
It's something that, again, certainly when I was a kid, I picked up a lot of frogs. It was something that I was never taught about. So there's ways to observe them, see them in the wild without having to pick them up. And I think that's a really important message to get across today.
Exactly.
Miss Sharpen's class, they wanted to know how many different species of frogs are there in Canada, guys? Did we do a Google search for that too?
Canada, lots. In Ontario, I believe there are 12 frog species and a couple of toad species. But Canada-wide, you're going to get a lot more diversity out on the West Coast. It's practically a rainforest out in Vancouver, but we can speak to here in Ontario. Canada's a big country, a lot of different things.
Yeah. Great question, Ms. Sharpens. All right, Ms. Barajas' class, they're also joining us in California. If you want to unmute your microphone, come on in. Take us away. Hi, guys. Let's see. Might be a little delay. Ms. Barajas, I will come back to you guys in just a minute. I know we had Miss M's class join us after we got underway. So Miss M's group, if you guys want to unmute your mic, come on in and go for it. Hi there.
Hi there. I have two questions. Do the frogs there eat anything other than bugs? And also, how big is the biggest frog at the zoo or in the world?
Great question. So no, the frogs that we have here at the zoo are insectivores. They do only eat insects. So we feed a mixture of fruit flies, bean beetles, which is a type of very small beetle that grows on black-eyed peas, actually, and crickets. Crickets being the easiest insect source of food to get. In terms of the largest frog at the zoo, we used to have a very large frog. It was a type of toad, actually. It was called a Colorado river toad, and it was about 6 inches across. As it stands right now, we don't have many terribly large species of frogs. The tomato frogs that we have are probably the largest that we have, and they're about 3 inches across. In terms of the largest frogs in the world, again, there's so many species, I can't say for certain what the absolute largest one is. The largest one in Ontario for sure is going to be the bullfrog. You're going to get some pretty giant frogs, big females of them. And in the frog world, the females do tend to be the larger ones.
Very, very cool. Not only do I love the Toronto Zoo programs because we get to highlight such cool species and have such great educators, but we whip through these questions. We've already covered so many. We're going to get a whole second round in a minute. Miss Barajas' class, I know you typed in the questions, so if you're having some tech difficulties, I can pass this along. I'll bring you in to see if you're good. Miss Barajas.
Fabian, can you unmute? Okay, go ahead. Next one out.
What chance does a frog have to live in?
Yeah, so back to that diagram, guys. Is there a percentage chance the frog has to survive?
Yeah, so you're looking at generally less than 1% of those eggs in the wild will make it to become an adult frog. Most of the time, they're eaten or die as eggs. They don't survive all that well as tadpoles, and even right after they metamorph into a froglet, even then, if they can get to that stage, it's still only about 20% make it to adulthood. So it is a hard life being a frog. But as Mary Ellen said, you can tell a lot about your habitat by the number of frogs and by the success rate of frogs out in the wild.
Yeah. Very cool question, guys. All right, we're going to head to Kiki and Ava. They're joining us as homeschoolers today, so welcome in, girls. If you want to unmute your microphone, if your parent does, come on in and you're good to go. Hi, girls.
I have 2 questions.
Yes, go for
it. Why do frogs jump so high, and why do they like to eat flies?
Ooh.
Excellent question. So their ability to jump is because of the environment that they live in. So even frogs that live in the rainforest, they live generally up in the trees. If you could only walk from place to place, you'd have a really hard time getting around. But our frogs, because they can jump pretty far, if they don't like the tree they're in or they don't like the plant they're in, they just hop to the next one over, and it's a really big advantage for them. It also helps them get away from predators if they were to try to be hopping. And in terms of why do they eat flies, it's basically that's the food that's available to them, the food that is the easiest for them to get. It's basically the same as, why does a cheetah eat an antelope? It's because it's their prey item, and over thousands upon thousands of years of evolution, that is what they are designed to eat.
And, flies are just delicious, as you girls might know. Yes, I got a laugh in the background. All right, I'm going to take a quick YouTube question, then we'll come back to our live classes. I know you guys are all rebels with your double questions, but we will try and stick to 1 question per group on our second round. Miss Karn's class wanted to know, how long can a frog survive in water without going on land, or vice versa? They're playing off this amphibian sort of, 2 worlds of frogs. Do they have to be in one or the other for any period of time?
They have to have their skin damp. There has to be a water coating on their skin. If they do dry out, basically they dehydrate, they can suffocate. They need the water to actually facilitate air exchange through their skin. So frogs and toads always have to be near a water source because they do need to be damp. That being said, it depends on the area they're in. If they happen to be a rainforest dwelling frog where basically everything you look at is wet, they really don't have to be near a pond or a body of water. But if it's a frog like we have here in Ontario, say we go through a drought, you're actually going to see them congregate more towards your wetlands and your pond areas because they do need to be near that water source.
Great question, guys. All right, 2 more quick ones on YouTube, and we'll go back to our last one. Miss Hulin's class, they're joining us in Ottawa Virtual School, grade 8. They want to know if there was an extended winter, say 4 extra months, which none of us want to think about now that it's getting warm here in Ontario. Would frogs be able to survive that, or is this one of those things that's on the board where they wouldn't be able to take that range of temperature?
That's a tricky one to talk about. First, because like you said, I don't want to think about winter going on any longer than it already has. But it would be very tricky. I would say there would be some frogs that would survive. You would tend to see more not make it through the winter. When they shut down their bodies, it is extremely stressful on these animals. If they have any kind of an underlying disease or condition, shutting down makes it worse. So that's when we tend to see a lot of frogs and even turtles not waking up from their winter sleep. And if you put that stress on the body for an additional several months, it's adding that much more pressure and that much more risk. So some would make it, yes. But if we decided to go to a deep freeze and we didn't get out of the negative temperatures until May or June, we would see a plummet in our frog populations, I would say.
Yeah. It's really worth noting, and I think a lot of people see this even with the plants in their own gardens, that if you have this climate change influence on the weather, where you have it getting warmer when it shouldn't and then cold again when it shouldn't, that can be really destructive to crops, to plants, to animals alike. It's something really worth noting as animal populations change and as climate change continues to be a major influence in Canada, the US, and beyond. Something to look for with animal populations. So, cool question, guys. All right, let's dive back in with our live classes. Miss Purple's class, you're up first. Come on in and take us away.
Okay, we want to know the largest animal that a frog eats.
Excellent question again, and we get that a lot actually. So generally, and I'll give this as a general statement with frogs, and it works for lizards as well actually. Ballpark, if you look at the distance between their eyes, that is the size of a prey item that they can safely eat. It is not a hard, fast rule. Some of the larger frog species are capable of eating things that would surprise you. But a general guideline is the space between their eyes. Like our golden frog here that we're looking at has about a centimeter distance between his eyes. That will be the largest prey item that he will be safely able to eat.
I'm really happy we got this question, and I want to stress that everyone should look this up when they're done. One of my favorite pictures in natural history ever in my entire life was in a book when I was a kid, like a Smithsonian book, and it's a frog eating a bat, like it's got the bat in its hand and is eating the bat, which is really sort of vaguely terrifying. So encourage you guys to check that out when you're done if you want to be absolutely horrified at frogs. They look innocent, but they might not be. Let's go to Ms. Becker's class. Come on back in, guys. Demute that mic, and you're good to go.
Hi again. One of our questions is a follow-up to that. Do frogs have teeth?
No, actually. So they don't have any teeth. They do have a very hard, rigid gum line. So when they do eat those bugs, it essentially crushes them in their gums. That being said, though, a lot of times if they eat a bug that's really small, it goes right into their stomach alive. There is no teeth. There's no chewing. They have to swallow everything whole.
Yeah. I love that question. So one of the things that you can use to identify different animal groups in general is the presence in different kinds of teeth. So a lot of reptiles will have teeth, of course, but they have the same teeth. One of the things that makes us mammals is you can see we have different kinds of teeth, like incisors at the front, molars at the back. That's one of the unique characteristics of mammals, whereas a lot of amphibians won't have them. Birds certainly have beaks instead. It's just a neat feature you guys can look for if you're ever out exploring in your own backyards. Quick question before we go to Smith Smarties from Miss Matsuba's class. They're joining us in Spruce Grove, Alberta, so welcome in, guys. Dominic wants to know, can frogs change their colors?
Not to the extent that something, say, like a chameleon or even an octopus can. What you'll see with frogs is they get darker or lighter. If it's really cool, really cold in the day, being that they are an ectotherm, or cold-blooded is the common term, they get their body temperature from the surrounding environment. If it's really cold or if it's really early in the morning, they can darken their skin. And basically think of that as like wearing a black t-shirt on a hot summer day. It heats you up a lot faster, so they are capable of getting that body temperature up a little bit quicker. And then they'll lighten themselves up as well.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right, let's go to Smith Smarties. Unmute that mic. Come on back. And if you want to keep the camera trained we can hear you and see you talking if you'd like, you're welcome to do that too, however you want to mix it up. Come on in, Smith Smarties. Take us away.
Okay. Our next question is, how old can frogs get, especially in Ontario?
Great question. So you're generally looking at like 10 years tops for some of the larger species of frog. Reptiles and amphibians kind of have this really cool relationship where the bigger they are, the longer they live. So it's a great gauge you can use in order to tell kind of where your average lifespan is. So some of the smaller ones, 6, 7, 8 years. Some of the really big ones can hit 15 plus. I would say an average, though, being about 10 to 12 years.
Yeah. That's actually surprisingly longer than I would have thought. That's very cool. All right, we're going to go to Kiki and Ava first, and then we're going to go to Miss Barajas and Miss M. So if everyone wants to mute your mic, you can right now. Kiki and Ava, girls, if you have another question for us, come on in, and we can check out the poser frog while we're taking the question. How cool is that?
I want to know what are some of frogs' enemies?
Ooh, enemies of frogs.
So basically anything that's bigger than them that wants to try to eat them would be the enemy of a frog. So birds, a lot of the times, some snakes and lizards, but it's going to get, I give a real answer for this one. Pretty much the enemy of almost every animal on this planet is us. We destroy habitats, we're causing pollution. So the best thing that you guys can do if you want to help save our frogs or save all of our species is, you can do your part. You can make sure things are kept clean, make sure we're recycling. If you see wildlife out and about, you can look at it, take a picture, tell everybody about it. But remember, leave it alone. These guys, they lived here long before we did. So we got to remember that this is their house and we're just kind of living in it right now.
Yeah, I think it's a really important message, and I love that you highlighted this. One thing that all our classes can do is sort of the essential distillation of what you can do to help conservation is don't waste. Whether that's emissions in your cars, whether that's food, whether it's plastics. If you don't waste, if you try and get that mindset, you really help protect frogs and all sorts of other amazing creatures. Before we take our last two questions, a few quick notes. If you're keen on frog conservation on the research side, check out a presentation on our YouTube channel by Jonathan Colby. It was amazing. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, see all our programs, check out all the frog programs. It's very, very cool. And I want to do a shameless plug for a second. If you are this May set to get outside, if you've heard of our Backyard Bio Initiative, it's coming up all May long. We're getting classes all around the world working with one another to share species near them and sort of nerd out over the magic of biodiversity. So if you want to make frogs a central feature of that, check out backyardbio.net. We'd love to have your class or family involved. All right, let's go to Miss M's class first, and Miss Barajas will wrap up in a minute. Miss M, I know you've been typing questions in the chat bar, but come on in person. More fun this way anyway. So share away.
Yes, for sure. Just one question?
Yeah. Go to. Be bold. Fine.
Okay. I have a question from Angela. Why are all the frogs different colors? And a question from Yusra. Are all the frogs poisonous at the zoo?
So the frogs are different colors. It's the pigmentation in their skin. It doesn't have anything to do with what they eat or anything like that. It is genetic. It is an element of camouflage. You wouldn't expect it, but I guess we saw it when we were looking at our poison dart frog habitat. Being bright orange or bright blue, you can camouflage really, really well in the rainforest. But the bright colors, the different bright colors, also help to tell predators, hey, I'm poisonous, don't come and try to eat me. So if you are kind of hanging out in South America in the rainforest and you see anything that's brightly colored, that is a general rule that thing is not cool. It is dangerous. And the frogs at the zoo. So none of our frogs actually have any poison here at the zoo because, as I said, they get their toxin from what they eat. So we only feed our frogs fruit flies, bean beetles, and crickets, all of which are completely harmless. So there's nothing for them to absorb and exude throughout their skin. So even our golden frogs here, which again are technically toads and they have those glands, there is no toxin in them. That being said, if you encountered a golden frog out in the wild, they have enough toxin in them to kill 10 adult human beings. And that's just from touch, like the toxin is absorbed through our skin. So I can't emphasize enough, especially with these poison ones, be sure to not touch them.
I want to stress too, sorry, like when I've been to the zoo in the past, it is so hard to have frogs behave this well. With live animal interactions, you're never assured of anything. It could be like Jurassic Park, you never see them in the back of the enclosure. So we've had like the best posing frogs today of all time. So lucky you guys as an audience today. I want to stress one thing. We've had a bunch of questions on YouTube about Frog Watch. So Frog Watch is an international program. So if you're in the US, if you're in Canada, there's amazing Frog Watch programs. Again, I'll just bring up the name for those who want to see it. It's a really, really cool program. I encourage you guys to look into it and take part when you're done this broadcast. All right, we'll wrap up with Miss Barajas' class, joining back again in California. Come on in, guys, and end us off.
Okay, Lysander.
What if you get some of the slime or poison on you? What is your reaction or side effects?
Did you catch that, team? Miss Barajas, can you repeat that for us?
So the question was, what if you get some of the slime on you? What would be a reaction or a side effect?
Yeah.
Excellent. So it does, again, depend on the frog. If it's a frog from here in Ontario, so none of our frogs are naturally very harmful. Some people might have just a contact allergic reaction that can end up with just like a little rash or an itchiness. But when you start dealing with the poison frogs, like the golden frogs or the poison dart frogs, it can vary. Sometimes it's just an irritation at the site of contact, so a redness, scratchiness, irritation, right up to even so much as touching them can be fatal. So it really depends on the type of frog you're talking about. But like I said, mostly if we touch a frog, it's actually doing a lot more harm to them. Like just the natural oils in our skin can harm them. But then also if we have like sunscreen or hand lotion, anything like that, we are going to do a lot more damage to them than they are to us.
I'm really glad we got that question. I want to make a really quick follow-up. So with a poison dart frog, if you touched it, does the venom go through your skin, or do you have to have like a cut or some sort of pore where it can actually get into your system? Or is it?
Excellent. So we'll talk a little bit about, so first the difference between venom and poison.
Yeah.
So venom has to enter your bloodstream. I've actually seen footage of snake experts fill a shot glass full of venom and just drink it. You better hope you don't have an ulcer. But it's perfectly fine. Whereas poison is either absorbed through your skin or you have to eat it, ingest it. So the frogs do have a poison. So because it is a poison and not a venom, some of them are so toxic that just the simple pores on your skin, just like your hair follicles, your natural sweat glands, can be enough to absorb it.
Wow, that is fascinating. I didn't know that. Also, I want to stress for our classroom, not that you needed the disclaimer, but if anyone ever suggests you to drink a vial of snake venom, don't do it. Run away screaming. Thank you guys so much for such a fun presentation. I want to stress again, we've done over 30 programs at the Toronto Zoo. You can check all those out on our YouTube channel. And if you want to see the Toronto Zoo just general digital amazing programs, check out Zoo2You. They may not be open to the public right now, but they've been doing a slew of really top-notch educational stuff. So check them out on the link below. Again, always a great pleasure having the Zoo team with us today. So what I'm going to do is, as we know, Zoo team, I'm going to bring in all our families and classrooms to say a big thank you and goodbye. Again, well over 400 kids tuning in today from across the continent. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Miss Kerpel, Miss Becker, Miss Barajas, Miss Gavin, and Ava, join me in saying a big
Thanks for having us.